conversations about peace can move forward. Now, we have no one better placed to unpack this for us than Dennis. Dennis McNamara works with the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, also known as CHD. CHD is one of multiple private mediation organizations that manages dialogue in places where most dialogue is really thought to be impossible. And Dennis is one of these people who flies out there and tries to dialogue. Dennis has a long career in the UN and in many other places, in Cambodia, Iraq, and
all sorts.
And all sorts. Voila. Dennis, I give you the floor, and I'm very happy you're with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. They say, of course, you should never compete on stage with children, and I've made that classic mistake, so sorry, but here we go again with that unavoidable older generation stuff. Thank you, though, to the organizers and the sponsors. I think it's a very timely and very appropriate subject. Many of us have spent most of our lives grappling with the fringes of these issues, and it won't be such an interesting personal anecdote, but I'd like to tell you a bit about some of the perhaps bigger messages that I think we can draw out of that might be useful. Of course, it's often said that peace is more than the absence of war. True, but peace in this context, this international context, starts when war ends, and only when war ends. Today, 95% of all wars are not between states, but they're between opposition groups and their state. And we need to give the representatives of these opposition groups, whoever they are and however they might be labeled, the neutral space and time to be properly heard, no matter how much we might disagree with what they say. This has always been an essential process, an essential part, of any process which aims to permanently resolve, especially internal conflicts, and is a very different process from resolving interstate conflicts. Promoting peace, ending war, particularly internal conflicts, from Syria to Sudan to DRC Congo to Colombia, requires dedicated efforts to build trust with and between both sides, especially with naturally suspicious non-state actors. Without that, most peace agreements quickly fall apart. The international approach to resolving conflicts has been designed and managed by states, and it does not lend itself easily to reaching out to opposition groups or rebel movements, particularly when some states choose to prescribe some of these groups as terrorists. Ending entrenched conflict and violence needs intensive dialogue and mediation between former warring enemies, no matter how unpalatable that may be to some. The unhelpful labeling of one side, usually politically motivated, by the other or by other governments, can be a major impediment to promoting this dialogue and to those of us who seek to do it. Private mediation actors, like the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue, Interpeace, and many others, avoid this labeling and try to provide a neutral space with an open agenda to promote a productive dialogue. While this is essentially a political process, humanitarian issues can also sometimes be used as an entry point to this. Humanitarian dialogue, as we call it, is using dialogue on humanitarian issues to promote initial discussions between conflicting parties. In some cases, it may help prepare the ground for broader peace initiatives, particularly when political negotiations are premature or are blocked by one or both of the parties. We've tried this in recent years, for example, in one African country, where for 2 years we have brought friends of the government and friends of a rebel group together to try and agree on an acceptable means of providing humanitarian assistance to desperately needy civilians trapped in the conflict area. We made some real progress with the friends of both sides initially, but unfortunately this has been now blocked by major political disagreements between the two principals. But the humanitarian political interface is a sensitive one. And humanitarian actors, many of whom are linked to Geneva, need to take great care to avoid being used as a cover for or a substitute for political inaction, or as an excuse to avoid serious resolution efforts at all. This is clearly a risky grey zone. And some of you may remember when Prime Minister Tony Blair declared in 1999 that Kosovo was a humanitarian war, which led many of us into an oxymoronic shock. I was also in Kosovo, and I will never forget one of the senior NATO generals in Kosovo who worked closely with us, announcing himself on arrival as a humanitarian general whose contingent would build houses for returning refugees. We have to spend our unspent defense budget, he explained. But whatever method is used, overcoming years of distrust, as well as the human consequences of violent conflict in order to move to a different dialogue, can take years of confidence-building measures. We need everyone to understand and accept that while conflict can be started very easily, neutralizing the consequences of war can take years of trust building. And this is often the key to sustainable or lasting peace agreements, many of which risk collapsing into renewed conflict within the first years after signature. I don't know if I've got time for the 3 decades of UN experience, but I'll touch on it. 2 minutes. 3 decades of experience in peacekeeping and UN and humanitarian action. I'll skip over a bit just to say that during that time, very briefly, I saw a very effective international humanitarian aid delivery system being developed. I saw a very ineffective international protection of civilians system which increasingly failed to protect civilians in conflict, which is the case today, continues to be the case today, and I'm afraid Syria in that context is only the last in a long line of tragic international failures in terms of civilian conflict. And all those years, including 3 terms with UN peacekeeping in Cambodia and in Kosovo and Timor-Leste, I never did see any sustained UN-led mediation efforts between the authorities and their opposition. And mediation must continue through the conflict into the post-conflict rebuilding stage if peace is to hold. For all of these reasons, in my view, and despite the risks, we need to invest much more in a strengthened, professional, active, international mediation and conflict resolution system, both public and private, deployed from the earliest possible stages of all conflicts. We just can't afford to wait the 20-plus years which it has taken to resolve most of Africa's recent wars, for example. Good mediators are needed early and usually are needed to stay engaged even after the fighting has stopped. The absence of war is not the end of mediation. Peace one day will come to these conflicts, but it may take years to reach that day. The sooner we accept the truism that negotiation and dialogue, understanding and reconciliation, not political posturing and military action, are the real ways to resolve these wars, the greater our chances of real success will, I think, become. Thank you.